Do you remember a time before streaming, before on-demand everything, when your entire afternoon was basically scheduled around what was on TV? Well, today we're taking a little trip back to that ritual. We're going to explore this 1-hour block of television that totally shaped a generation and what it tells us about two really iconic shows. And it all starts with this feeling, right? A feeling I bet so many of us remember. School's out, the grown-ups are busy, and for that one perfect hour, the TV is all yours. This wasn't just watching TV. It was a ceremony, a moment you built your whole day around. It was appointment television. And that's really what appointment television was all about. It wasn't just a show, it was a cultural habit we all shared. It gave a rhythm to our days, and, it gave a whole generation of kids something to talk about. It's a practice that, let's be honest, in today's world of endless streaming choices, has pretty much disappeared. All right, so let's wind the clock back. It's 4 p.m. sharp. The first stop on our daily TV trip takes us to the town of Bedrock, and you know who lives there? The modern Stone Age family, the Flintstones. Now, here's something that might surprise you. The Flintstones didn't start out as a kid's cartoon. Not at all. It was actually a primetime show, kind of like The Simpsons of its day, and it was aimed at adults. But its second life, the one most of us remember, kicked off when it went into syndication and started airing every single afternoon. And the effect was just huge. Syndication didn't just give the show a new time slot, it gave it this massive new audience of kids. By moving to the afternoon, it became an after-school institution. You could even argue it became way more famous and beloved than it ever was in primetime. But the adventure didn't stop in Bedrock. Nope. At 4:30 on the dot, it was time to get up and physically change the channel. We were leaving the world of commercials and cartoons for something completely different. We're flipping over to public television, to PBS, for the quiet, wonderful world of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And the station itself, WMPT in Maryland, was an absolute powerhouse. Get this. Its transmitter was so strong that its signal could reach across 5 different states. This wasn't just some local station. For millions of kids, it was this constant, reliable friend that always came in clear, no matter how bad your rabbit ears were. And every single show, every single day, started with this incredibly comforting ritual. The song, taking off the jacket, putting on the cardigan, changing the shoes, it was his way of letting you know you were in a safe, familiar place. It was the show saying, "Hello, I'm glad you're here." But, and this is one of my favorite facts, hidden inside that familiar routine was an incredible secret. The theme song, it wasn't a recording. It was a live, unique jazz improvisation by pianist Johnny Costa every single time. Mr. Rogers wanted that creative spark, so while the words were the same, the music was a brand new performance just for that episode. And then, of course, the trolley would show up with its little ding-ding. That was the signal. That's when we knew we were leaving the real world behind and taking a trip to the one and only neighborhood of make-believe. This place was populated by this unforgettable cast of characters, both puppets and people. And what's absolutely amazing is that most of the puppet voices, from the booming King Friday the 13th to the shy Daniel Strip's Tiger, were all performed by one person, Fred Rogers himself. A show like this didn't just stay on the screen. It lit up your imagination. The author of our source material talks about how he actually mapped the landmarks of make-believe onto his own backyard. The swing set became King Friday's castle. It was that powerful. But it was never just about make-believe. The stories in that neighborhood always had a purpose. They were these amazing vehicles for teaching kids about really complex emotions, about being kind, about feeling angry or sad, and just how to navigate the world with a little more empathy. So, when you're a kid watching a show every single day, you start to notice things, little inconsistencies that don't quite add up. And for our author, these little details led to a major childhood breakthrough. He was cracking the code of what a rerun actually was. So how does a 7-year-old play TV detective? You look for the clues, and they were all there. In some episodes, Mr. Rogers had less gray hair. In Make-Believe, sometimes Prince Tuesday was a baby puppet, and then the next day he'd be an older kid puppet. The timeline was all mixed up, and that was the big mystery. And a production schedule is where you find the answer. I mean, think about it. In its first year, 1968, they made a mind-boggling 130 episodes. But then, the number drops. And by 1979, they were only making 15 new episodes a year. That means that as a viewer, watching a rerun wasn't just likely, it was pretty much guaranteed. And there was one more killer clue, a musical one. If you were watching an older episode from before 1972, the show would end with a song called Tomorrow. But if you were watching a more recent one, it ended with It's Such a Good Feeling. The closing theme itself was like a secret decoder ring for what year you were watching. So when you put it all together, this single hour of television was fascinating. It showed two totally different worlds. You had the Flintstones, this commercial giant brought back to life by syndication, and then you had Mr. Rogers, a quiet, thoughtful gem from public broadcasting. They couldn't be more different, but side by side, they built the foundation of an entire generation's afternoon. It's pretty amazing to see how much our media world has changed. But it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Back when you had to be there, at that exact time, on that exact channel, what was the one show you would drop everything for? What was your appointment television?
All right, let's take a walk down a street that, for so many of us, feels more like home than just about any other place on television. We're going deep inside the absolute magic of Sesame Street.
You hear that, and it's like a time machine, right? For millions of us, that song was the dinner bell for our imagination, the signal that our absolute favorite show was about to begin.
And this wasn't something you just kind of caught if you were home. No way. You ran home from school, you parked yourself right in front of that TV. Because for the next hour, you weren't just a kid in your living room. You were a citizen of this incredible, vibrant neighborhood.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What was the secret sauce? How did they do it? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. We are going to break down the formula, meet the unforgettable neighbors, and really unpack the bold, brilliant lessons that made this show so much more than just another kids program.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start our tour right there on the street itself. Because you have to understand, the set, it wasn't just a backdrop. It was a character all on its own.
What's just so incredible is how real this place felt. I mean, look at this layout. You can picture it perfectly. You've got the iconic steps of the 123 Sesame Street building. You know exactly where Oscar the Grouch's trash can is. You can see the alleyway leading right to Big Bird's nest. And right there, the heart of it all, Mr. Hooper's store. It felt like a real, lived-in, breathing place that you could actually visit.
Of course, a neighborhood is just a collection of buildings without its residents. And this is where the pure genius of Sesame Street just shines.
So first up, the Muppets. The legendary creations of Jim Henson and his team like the incredible Frank Oz. You had the sweet, innocent, always curious Big Bird, the classic odd couple, Ernie and Bert, the hilariously frantic Grover, our beloved Grump, Oscar, and of course the one and only Cookie Monster. Not to mention the Count and even Kermit the Frog, who would pop in as a news reporter. These guys were the heart and soul of the whole operation.
And then you had the humans, the grown-ups on the block. Bob, Gordon, and Susan, Maria and Luis, the wonderful Mr. Hooper. They weren't just side characters filling out the scene. They were the anchors. They were the kind, patient, steady adults who made that whole neighborhood feel so safe and so warm. And this right here, this is the crucial dynamic that made the whole thing work so brilliantly. See, the Muppets, no matter what their personality was, they basically acted like us, like kids. They were curious, they got frustrated, they made messes, they had big feelings, and they were always learning something new. The humans, on the other hand, they were the perfect grown-ups. They were our guides, our patient teachers, the calm voice that explained the world. We, the viewers, saw ourselves in the Muppets, and we learned right alongside them from the humans. It was perfect.
But the show wasn't just about what was happening on the main street. No, it was this incredible, fast-paced collage of songs, cartoons, and skits that were completely unforgettable.
I bet every single one of you just sang that in your head, didn't you? These little animated shorts, like the shopping list jingle, were designed to be super catchy, super repetitive, and man, did they work. They are permanently burned into our collective brain.
And who could possibly forget this? This masterpiece of pure educational energy. That pinball machine, the super funky music by the Pointer Sisters, the flashing lights. It was, hands down, the most exciting way in human history to learn how to count to 12. It was just pure joy in a can.
And the sheer variety was just astounding. I mean, one minute you're watching Super Grover make another clumsy crash landing, the next you're in a restaurant with Grover driving some poor customer absolutely bonkers. Then, boom, Kermit the Frog is on the scene reporting from a fairy tale.
This rapid-fire style was totally revolutionary. It was all based on research about how to keep a kid's attention by constantly switching things up and keeping that energy way, way up.
You know, the show's cultural reach was just off the charts. It wasn't just its own little world, it was a place so famous that honest-to-goodness stars from primetime TV would just stop by.
For a kid watching in the 70s or 80s, this was a legit mind-blowing event. You're just watching your favorite show, and then all of a sudden, the Fonz from a totally different TV universe is right there. It felt like two worlds colliding in the absolute coolest way possible.
And they always used these cameos to teach something. In this one clip, you've got Fonzie and Richie in the bathroom at Arnold's. The Fonz is brushing his teeth, and he explains to Richie why it's so important. When Richie says he forgot the Fonz, because he's the Fonz, just happens to have a spare one ready to go. A simple, important lesson delivered by one of the biggest TV stars on the planet. Just brilliant.
But this is where the show went from being a great show to a truly important one. Because for all the fun with letters and numbers, the most powerful lessons Sesame Street ever taught were about life and sometimes about loss.
So, in 1983, the wonderful actor who played Mr. Hooper, Will Lee, he passed away in real life. And the producers, they made an incredibly courageous decision. Instead of just saying he moved away or retired, they chose to address his death head-on, right there on the show. It became one of the most important moments in TV history.
The scene is it's unforgettable. Big Bird can't understand why Mr. Hooper isn't coming back, and through his confusion, he asks the adults that simple, devastating question that every child asks, why? And the grown-ups, they don't give him a cheap, easy answer. They tell him the truth, just because. And they let him know it's okay to be sad and that they would all be there for him. It was a masterclass in teaching empathy. And then there was the whole deal with Mr. Snuffleupagus. Now, for years, it was a running gag, right? Only Big Bird could see him. The adults always just missed him and would pat Big Bird on the head, talking about his imaginary friend. But by 1985, the producers had a huge realization. They were sending a really harmful message, that grown-ups won't believe you when you tell them something important. So they changed it. They had everyone finally meet Snuffy, and they apologized to Big Bird for not believing him. It was this huge, powerful lesson about trusting kids.
So, okay, when you put all of these pieces together, what was it? What made this one little street a global phenomenon that changed the world?
Well, it was this perfect, magic formula. You had a setting that felt like a real home. You had that brilliant dynamic of the Muppets acting as the kids and the humans as their loving guides. You had that super innovative variety show format that never, ever got boring. And maybe, most importantly, you had a team of creators with the courage to treat their audience, kids, with intelligence and deep respect, taking on the toughest topics you can imagine with incredible grace. And really, that's the legacy, isn't it? The magic of Sesame Street wasn't just in the puppets or the songs. It was built on this revolutionary idea that still feels so important today. It's the answer to that question. What happens when you make a show that doesn't talk down to kids, but lifts them up, respects them, and helps them make sense of our complicated world, one sunny day at a time?
Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to talk about something called appointment television. Think back to being a kid in the 70s. Your whole world, it basically revolved around a TV schedule. And for our guide on this journey, it was a ritual that all started with a very specific smell and ended, believe it or not, with a secret superhero. So let's just start right here with this really powerful memory from our source author, Carlo DeSalvo. For him, the whole afternoon ritual kicked off with a smell. His dad's cologne. He says it was nice, but man, it was overpowering. And that smell, that was the signal. It meant a very simple but kind of profound exchange was about to go down. He was going to get one single piece of bubble gum. And that little piece of gum, well, that's the key to this whole story. See, that piece of gum always showed up right smack in the middle of this sacred after-school TV time. A routine that really defined what it was like to be a kid for a whole generation. And that is what we're digging into today, the magic, the shared ritual of what we call appointment television. Okay, so what's really fascinating here is how this little personal memory connects to something way bigger. So the author's dad, he was chewing all this gum to try and quit smoking, and by sharing just one piece every day, he accidentally plugged his kid into one of the biggest, fiercest pop culture battles of the 70s, the Great Bubblegum War. I mean, look at this timeline. The mid to late 70s, it was just a total explosion of bubblegum innovation. Before this, you had stuff like Bazooka, which, let's be honest, was tough. It was a workout for your jaw. But then, bam! 1975, Bubble Yum shows up and completely changes the game with this super soft texture. And that kicked off a full-on arms race for who could make the softest, craziest flavored gum out there. So as you can imagine, Bubble Yum's popularity just went through the roof. But then this really bizarre rumor started to spread. You know how it is on playgrounds and in school lunchrooms? Kids had to have an explanation for how this gum got so soft. And, well, the rumor mill came up with something pretty wild. Yup, you're reading that right. Spider eggs. The rumor was that the secret ingredient was spider eggs. I know, it sounds absolutely nuts now, but back then, it got so big that it actually started to hurt their sales. It got so bad that the company, Lifesavers, had to take out these huge full-page ads in newspapers just to say, hey, no spiders in our gum, we promise. So yeah, this chart really lays it all out. To even compete in this war, you had to have your own thing, right? Your own gimmick? Bubble Yum was the OG, the original soft gum. Bubblicious came in as the wild one, the innovator with all the crazy flavors. And then you had Hubba Bubba, with its whole cowboy thing, promising you could blow these huge bubbles and they wouldn't stick all over your face. Okay, so let's get back to that after-school ritual. Imagine our author, he's chewing his piece of bubblegum, but he's also watching that clock. Because at 6 p.m. sharp, right after Sesame Street wrapped up, the next big appointment was about to hit. It was this brand new super high-energy show from the exact same creators. And it always started with this. That iconic, booming shout. That was the voice of the one and only Rita Moreno, and it was the signal, the call to arms, that kicked off every single episode of The Electric Company. Now, this show was different from Sesame Street. No Muppets. Instead, what they had was this absolutely killer cast of actors. I mean, we're talking about legends. You had Rita Moreno, a super young Morgan Freeman, and in that first season, Bill Cosby, who was a huge part of getting the show off the ground. And their whole mission was to do these funny sketches to help teach kids who were, just graduating from Sesame Street how to read. And man, this show was just so clever. They had these really innovative bits, like the shadow box, where you just see silhouettes of the actors sounding out words. They had animated cartoons, live-action sketches. They just did everything they could to make grammar and phonics feel like fun, not like homework. But here's where it gets really interesting. Beyond all the grammar lessons and the amazing cast, the Electric Company was hiding some seriously cool pop culture secrets. I mean, this was a place where different worlds just smashed into each other in a way you would never, ever expect from a kids' TV show. So just think about it for a second. What educational kids show, a show about reading, would feature Marvel's biggest superhero and a Looney Tunes legend? Like, how is that even possible? It sounds completely made up, but I'm telling you, it happened. You guessed it. The Electric Company. This little educational show on PBS had both of these giant pop culture icons, and they wove them right into the show's format in this way that was honestly revolutionary. Nobody had done it before, and you really don't see it much today either. Okay, so get this. Way before any of the blockbuster movies, the first time Spider-Man ever appeared in live action was right here, in these little segments. And here's the brilliant part. To get kids to read, he never said a word out loud. All of his lines popped up in these comic book speech bubbles. And if that wasn't already the coolest thing ever, the narrator for these bits was often Morgan Freeman. Yeah, seriously. And then there was this other mind-blowing crossover. The actual legendary animator Chuck Jones, the guy behind the original Looney Tunes, he came out of retirement to make brand new Roadrunner cartoons just for this show. And they changed them up a bit, adding more signs and words to read. Oh, and they were a little kinder to Wile E. Coyote. He never went splat at the bottom of the canyon. He'd always land on a trampoline or something. Okay, but we do have to touch on a more difficult part of this whole story. Because, looking back at the stuff we loved as kids can mean facing some really uncomfortable truths about the people who created it. And the author tackles this directly when talking about one of the show's key figures. And this quote right here just perfectly sums up the problem. He says it's like trying to unscramble eggs. You just can't do it. How do you square these amazing childhood memories with the horrible things we now know one of the creators did? He makes it clear he's not excusing it, but he also can't just erase these things that were so important to him growing up. It's just a really honest look at a very, very complicated legacy. And that brings us all the way back to where we started, that daily ritual. See, the Electric Company wasn't just some random show. For the author, it was the big finish to this whole 2.5-hour block of TV. Starting at 4 p.m., it was his entire afternoon lineup. That was his appointment television, a whole journey that took him from cartoons to Mr. Rogers to Sesame Street, and then the big finale with Phonics and Spider-Man. So that really just leaves one last question for you. It doesn't matter if you grew up in the 70s, the 90s, or even the 2000s, before everything was on demand. What was your appointment television? What was that one show or that block of shows that you absolutely had to be home for? And what were the little rituals that went with it? The snacks, the theme songs, what were the things that made that time so special for you?